I've got some OGs in the house this evening. We've got Jehan Chu, who's the founder and managing partner at Kenetic Capital and one of Hong Kong and I would say Asia's crypto OGs. And on the other side, we have Graham Friedman, who is a very, very early Bitcoiner from almost a decade ago, I think, Graham. And Graham is also currently a director at Republic. Yeah, without further ado, guys, great to have you. I wanted to start off with, I guess, the thread that ties us all together, which is obviously cryptocurrency. How did you guys get into crypto? What are each of your crypto stories?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Graham, you want to go first?
Sure.
Go for it.
I think, I came into it in the same way many people did, which was Reddit. And basically around 2010, shortly after Satoshi's white paper in 2009, stumbling around the internet, found this magic digital money. And, for me, it really fit into my obsession and my vision of the future for I guess what is now coined the fourth industrial revolution. I've always been very curious about things like augmented reality, digital ownership, what our future is going to look like when we're roboticized and computers are really communicating amongst themselves more than between human computer connections. And, to be honest, I had initially approached Bitcoin thinking about autonomous vehicles on the road. And if everything on the street is automated, how exactly does one pass each other, or what does traffic look like? And Bitcoin really sort of fit into that mold of being able to pull up next to somebody, have a computer, make a deal, maybe a micro payment in order to pass and move. Those were really my early ideations back in 2010 as to what I saw Bitcoin useful for. I think since then, it's gone through the cypherpunk phase into the libertarian, and now we're moving very far into traditional finance even. So to me, it still maintains that fourth industrial revolution component and is really proving to be the digital integration for our digital identities in this new world, as well as how we maintain sovereignty over data, as well as value and beyond. So that was really my introduction. It was through sci-fi sort of explorations in my head. How about you, Jehan?
Yeah, it's funny actually. So I got into this space later than you, around like late 2013, like December of 2013. And I don't actually know exactly how I got in. I have kind of snippets of memories. One is that I was getting a haircut. And I was reading, it must have been like GQ or something like that. And they were profiling like the Winklevoss twins or something like that. And that's really the first time I remember having some type of impression of Bitcoin. And I imagine that there must have been some type of connection, because at that time I was still an art dealer, kind of advising people on buying art and such. And the Winklevoss twins and I were both on the cap table of an art startup called Paddle 8, which is online auctions. So they were investors. I was an advisor, so I didn't pay for my shares, but I had shares. And that kind of gave me a connection to them where I was like interested in them. So it must have been, I was reading the article about them and it talked about Bitcoin. So I wasn't even trying to read about Bitcoin. I was just like, oh, I have nothing to read. So Winklevoss twins. And then from there, my next recollection is really just reading, I guess. It must have been articles, it must have been Reddit, it must have been all these things. I remember going to my first Bitcoin meetup in Hong Kong. It was at a bar called Grappas, which was like an Italian place, and I met some of the early kind of Bitcoiners. Yeah, those are my earliest recollections. But the kind of first, as with everybody, that rabbit hole, that first 6 months where basically you not only, could you just like go to sleep and wake up and be reading, like just seeing what else was on Reddit, but you were actually able to consume all of the available information. Like you could actually get your head around all of it and stay on top of it, which obviously is not possible today. So that was kind of my intro into it. And of course I bought like on local Bitcoins like everybody else. I was, had some coins on Mt. Gox. When Mt. Gox went down, fortunately I didn't lose anything until I went into Bitcoin Builder, which was like trading the Gox kind of coins as they were locked up. And so I lost a little bit of money on that trade, but overall, it was good times. And it's funny that you bring up the idea of the cars and the micropayments, because that was one of my go-to kind of examples of this like futuristic vision of kind of blockchain-based commerce and that type of really super future. And of course, now it's just about everything, right? It's about business. It's about, kind of sovereign identity. It's about, kind of sovereign states and just the rise of kind of decentralization and Web3 stack. And it's everything. I mean, it's, it's way too much to kind of digest, but it's all still super exciting. I find myself like going through waves of engagement and waves of kind of like enthusiasm, not necessarily correlated with price, but it's still really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I got sucked into the rabbit hole a little bit later than both of you guys. For me, it was right after the 2014 price collapse. I heard about it 2013, and then 2014. Actually, this Austrian kid at this party was telling me about this. I'll never forget. It was like this 19-year-old Austrian kid, and he was just stressing out because I guess he had put a lot of his net worth into Bitcoin, and it was collapsing, and that just sort of got me into the rabbit hole. And it wasn't until I guess about a year or so later that I really started to spend a lot of time into it. And then obviously that's how I met you guys. And yeah, what a what a wild ride it's been. But yeah, I guess to move on that, both of you guys are doing very interesting things in this space. Jehan, you're obviously mostly an investor, wearing your investor hat. As I understand, Graham, you're approaching things more from an advisory angle, advising a lot of the earlier stage projects with their gestation and growing into full-on enterprises. But I'm curious, and this is just a question for both of you guys. What excites you most about where we are right now? We've seen in the past 3 years, obviously, what happened 2017, 2018. We had this sort of crypto winter, and then now, especially in the past couple of months, there's been this very palpable sort of renewed energy again. But beyond things like price, beyond all that, what excites you guys?
Adoption for me, man. It's definitely adoption. And it's weird because it's a double-edged sword. What's wrong with the space? Adoption. What's exciting about the space? Adoption. So I think the biggest challenges that we've seen and the most frustrating and kind of just, emotionally deflationary kind of like aspect of blockchain and crypto is like, we just haven't seen so much reality kind of kick into place about things that can be done, like people can actually use other than like Bitcoin and the rest of it is really just experiments. And so that's kind of the sad part. But the exciting part is, at least from our perspective, we have really started to see the first mega projects, I think, in terms of users, in terms of traction, counting in the millions of users. And I think that is like significant, like that's new. And so forgive me, I think Alex, I probably told you about this before, but there's two products that I always kind of name check that are, full disclosure, they're in our portfolio. We invested in them like a couple of years ago. One is Human Protocol, or like HCAPTCHA. So it's like it replaces Google reCAPTCHA with a decentralized solution that, instead of paying Google, like basically using your time and your data to solve these basically image recognition problems for like Waymo, instead you get paid a token to solve basically an image puzzle, identify the red dress or locate all the traffic lights, that kind of thing. It's a super simple type of concept, but they did a deal with Cloudflare where basically took 100% of Cloudflare's captured traffic and over from Google. And that's 12% of the internet, which is now protected by HCAPTCHA in various forms versus Google. And that's like the real kind of traction where it's significant, it's enterprise, it's in the millions, and it's live. So I always say that this is probably the most widely used crypto native application in the world now, and nobody's heard about it. And then the second one is like this product called Render, which is decentralized GPU kind of resource sharing. And so basically gamers with like the high-end spec gaming cards and NVIDIA cards, they can rent out their GPUs when they're not gaming and when they're sleeping, and it will basically process 3D graphics for some of like the world's top studios, like Disney or J.J. Abrams, like who are all like clients. And there's 16,000 GPUs that are all in this decentralized network, which is larger than the next 3 enterprise suppliers combined. So Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. And that's significant. Like these are the stories which are like real, and it's crypto and it's live. And that's the kind of thing where it's like, man, we're kind of getting there.
Yeah. I mean, I've always said that adoption will happen. You'll sort of start to know that adoption's happening when people are using applications like, for example, Render, or using software where the piping underneath is crypto powered, but to anyone who's using it, you actually have no idea that it's doing such, right? And so that's exciting to see. How about you, Graham?
So that's a pretty loaded question. And I think that definitely interests in the space change and pivot over time. At the core, at the beginning of this year, I would say I was very interested in service layer technologies, things that make Web3 feel like Web2 or make them accessible. There's a variety of projects that we're working with that do single sign-on layers. So you can log into a dApp with a single click of a button, like log in via Google, Facebook, Twitter, the things we're used to, or being able to transact cryptocurrencies by sending to maybe Jehan.Chu, right? Or Jehan at Kenetic versus long alphanumeric string, which I think everybody, even experienced Bitcoiners, sort of have a bit of a fear when you transact any substantial amount of money. So, I would say starting out the year, very much looking in that direction. There's sort of in the middle, I'm also very fascinated by some of the 2017 ICOs that I think everybody on this call invested in, and they're starting to come to fruition, right? They're starting to release some products.
Which ones are you excited about?
So, Kyber Network has been very interesting. Even seeing Gnosis release their full product, that was, maybe they were 2015 or so, right? They were very long.
Yeah, they were Gen 1.
Yeah. So just a lot of those names coming out and rolling out mainnets, I think is really fascinating. And, in a more microcosm, or I should say with more immediacy, I've been very interested in the macro trend around mining. So if you follow the Great American Mining Company is really, they're putting all of their mining rigs into these mobile shipping containers, and they can take them out to the oil fields and really capitalize on the flaring, which is 20% of gas and oil mining just gets flared. And you can put these miners right on top of that. Now let's extrapolate that with what's going on with the greater energy space. You have the hydroelectric facility in New York that was what? We have too much energy. We don't know what to do with it. Let's mine some Bitcoin. I believe it was Ukraine. The energy minister just came out saying, we're looking at all these liabilities on our bottom line. And the solution that we can sort of start experimenting with is, do we mine cryptocurrency? Do we put it towards Bitcoin? So, at the end of the day, I'd be very concerned about oil being burnt just for Bitcoin's sake. But, the grand scheme would be that competitive energies, greener energies start to prove more value. And in the case of, I think it was Ukraine, I could be wrong on that geography, but they're looking at nuclear. So, that's very, very interesting to me. What are you doing with this? How can you turn this liability into a profit maker? Those are the kind of things I love to look at. But, it's such a robust and interesting space. At the same time, community is reviving itself and proving its worth. I think we saw that with the Hive Steam competition. Mm-hmm. And, DAOs are very much back.
Hey, can you recap that Hive Steam competition just for people who don't know it?
Absolutely. So it was super fascinating. Steam is a blockchain built with a social network idea around it, right? Creators get paid for their content. There's a tokenization where people that consume that content can support them. You can upvote, all sorts of sort of economic metrics involved there. And on top of Steam was Steemit, a blogging platform. I've been posting photography on there for a very long time.
Really?
Yep,
How much have you made from your photography posting?
I'd have to go and look, but I think I'm around $42 last I checked. Of
Nice.
course, that vacillates quite. Yeah. Woo.
Cool. Is it like one of those things where it's like open source, or like an Unsplash, or like people can kind of use it, or is it just you're just posting it for for people's consumption?
So they could absolutely use it. This is a major topic with digital photography, right? About digital rights management. I'm kind of the vein that anybody who wants it can take it. Like, you can always do a screenshot. And then if you really want to, you can Photoshop out any sort of watermark. So I've never concerned myself too much with digital theft. My attitude is if it's on the internet, you're asking for it. So the way Steam is really working is more, it's like upvotes, it's approval, it's people tipping you. They're not necessarily buying it and taking it and doing anything with it. It's just more that the content's out there, they like it, toss you a couple bucks. And I guess the idea is that it becomes circular, right? You start paying people for content that you like. Let's call it a decentralized Patreon in a way. So Steemit was on there, was really popular because it's a decentralized blog posting platform, which I think, this is also another point of interest as YouTube and Twitter have started to censor people. But basically the long and the short of it is Justin, son of Tron, laid the framework for a hostile takeover by the voting system that Steam utilizes, which is very similar to EOS. It's a decentralized autonomous consortium, which means there's about 21 or so people that are managing this platform. And as a group, they decide on how it functions via voting power, which is correlated to the amount of tokens that they have at stake. Anyway, what happened was in this hostile takeover attempt was that Tron and Justin Sun and the team, no anger here on my end, guys, if you see this, but they did leverage the user tokens on exchanges for this voting power. And the exchanges apparently thought this was just a fork vote. So they said, yeah, go for it. Didn't really monitor it too strongly. And all of these votes from people that just had Steam on exchanges were leveraged, and they were able to vote out the main operators of the network, replacing those authoritarian figures with insiders, right? And in that case, it was a very hostile takeover. The narrative that was super interesting to me was that, a lot of the community said DPoS, or distributed proof of stake, has failed. This like collective group that, talks to each other and makes decisions together. I guess this governance model doesn't really work. But then they got together and said, hey, fuck this. Let's fork the chain. We control the network. We control the community. And, again, these networks are really only as strong as their user base. And that's why first mover advantage can be so huge. But they ended up taking it. They created Hive. All of the exchanges that felt they got suckered supported this. So you have, a new forked chain getting listed on Binance, on Wobi. You couldn't ask for more. And it was, I don't know, went up 400%, 800% week over week. It was a phenomenal success. So, seeing the community come back in and be able to. I wonder what that
market cap is now. I'm gonna look it up while we're here.
Yeah. I was definitely watching it. Like, should I get some of this Hive? And then you're always too late.
You and me both, man. You and me both. I was following that whole thing.
It's number 52 on CoinGecko.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I did back to some of the older guys.
Million. Market cap of 115 million, $10 million of daily volume. That's not nothing.
No, and it's only like what, a month old, maybe a month and change. Time is definitely becoming more difficult these days. So it's a loaded question when you say what are you interested in. There's so many points to take interest, and it depends. Are you looking at the developers? Are you looking at the community? Are you looking at the miners, which are completely independent, extremely combative, and ruthless capitalistic system? So I think that's why we get into this, right? This sort of folds back into your first question, and the space lends itself tremendously well to curious minds that just want to drink up learning and knowledge. And as we keep moving forward, there's so many things being developed. I didn't even talk about Lightning Network, and Bakkt is going to launch a whole ecosystem where rewards points integrate with cryptocurrencies, and gamer tokens.
Yeah, but all this stuff is like still seems like kind of experiments, right? Like it's all lab stuff. Like you talked about like Gnosis, and I love those guys. Like I did an Ethereum meetup with Martin a couple weeks back. Like where are the users? Why is adoption and like actual users not part of like what you're talking about? And where do you think that's going to come from? Like, do you see users?
Well, on the flip side with Hive, we see users.
Do we? Like, how many users are there?
I'll have to research that and get back. But they definitively had a user base, and those metrics can be found. We could bring on one of those Hive members. I'm not.
Okay, let me ask you a different question. Like, what number of users would we collectively mark as like statistically significant that crypto has made it?
That's a good question.
I'm not talking about trading.
Any users is very good. Yes.
I'm not talking about speculation. I'm talking about actual like utilitarian actors.
Well, I think you would have to compare it if we're looking at versus like TikTok, right? An actual viral app that
Sure.
Then those numbers we're nowhere near it. I think the closest thing we have is Bitcoin wallets, right? Everything else, once you start getting into the crypto ecosystem, you still have to be a bit of a comp sci nerd. Like you have to be able to mess around with node features. Yeah, a little bit of coding. Understand how to at least open terminal and execute some stuff. So, that's why I think
what's the year we break out of the lab, do you think? Best guess. Alex, what's your best guess?
Man, I want to say about 3 years from now. I say that because, well, for me, I always flip-flop between, I always flip on that exact same question, right? Which is, so far to me, the killer app for crypto in general has been just really tapping into humans' propensity to want to speculate, right? So I think that obviously has, as we all know, positives and negatives. It's interesting though that I think, especially in the past week, given all the news that's come out about, guys like Paul Tudor Jones coming out and saying that they own some crypto, that I think is important because while it does still keep the space as a whole very much in that lane, in that speculation vein, I think that the significance of that is that, for me at least, it removes career risk for people in fund management, institutional investment, to actually own Bitcoin.
You think it gives them cover?
Sorry?
You think it gives them air cover?
Yeah, because if shit hits the fan, they can say, well, Paul Tudor Jones, one of the most influential, legendary hedge fund managers of all time, he bought some, right? And so
I was talking to a hedge fund manager, like a traditional hedge fund manager who was relatively early ETH as well. So he's kind of like one of these angels in Turkey, and he, but he's an older gentleman, and he's, and he was saying, he was really surprised that Bitcoin didn't move more off the Paul Tudor Jones comment. And he was surprised that there wasn't more of a price spike on the back of that because he is so influential. And in his mind, it should have influenced some of his buddies who are also like, have $10-20 billion funds to kind of move in.
So it's interesting you say that, actually, right? Because I feel as if maybe, this is just a theory, right? But I feel as if a big hurdle is the marginal additional buyer actually knowing how to buy crypto, right? Well, sure, you can buy futures, but if you want to actually own a Bitcoin yourself, how do you actually go do that?
But he bought futures, right?
The reason why I actually feel as if, well, maybe there wasn't as big of a spike is, people always talk about buy the rumor, sell the news. So I feel as if that was something that I think everybody that was already capable of perhaps, going on to an exchange, purchasing a Bitcoin, storing it in a cold wallet, that kind of a thing, was probably, that community was already involved already, right? So I think for the incremental buyer, especially for an institutional investor, that's a hurdle. But I do think that definitely that message from Paul Tudor Jones definitely reached far and wide. And I say that because, no joke, later on this coming week, I think Thursday or Friday, I'm actually getting on this Zoom call with like 20 gray hairs that are friends of my father's that are like, oh, Paul Tudor Jones is buying Bitcoin. Oh, okay, inflation. Oh, central banks printing money endlessly. We should learn about this. So for me, that was definitely an effect. Maybe we didn't see it in price in the immediate term, and hell, it's only been what, 2 days since the announcement. So I do think it will have an effect. Maybe just not in the linear way that some might expect, right? I mean, as you guys all know, there's so much, for lack of a better term, market fuckery that goes on. So things tend to happen. Was that?
I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So things tend to happen in ways that make sense when you look back on them, but then while you're in them, sometimes don't. That's my take, though, at least.
Well, also, if this knowledge was out before the public statement, we did see a huge rally from the March 13th crash. So I don't know, is that built in? If you do your research and you see that you're right at the edge of the halving, and you really understand that, if you talk to miners, they want the Bitcoin price to be as low as possible so that their competition gets wiped out. It really depends how deep down this rabbit hole you go, and if you have really solid diligence teams, because you're going to leverage substantial amounts of your client cash, then there might be a better strategy than just diving in off the news. But one thing I always found very interesting, Alex, was you mentioned your father and these gray hairs, and we worked very closely with him. He always discussed the correlation of early gold in the 70s, 80s, and what we're seeing with Bitcoin. So, to me, that relationship that you brought in through your father, who has such vast experience in this space, and to see his sort of eyes open up and he's like, I lived through this, right? Like, it's happening again. This was that's always been very fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's something to me that I think in the past couple of months, as I've sort of started to just re-educate myself about things like market cycles and being able to zoom out and have sort of multi-decade views on things. That's such an interesting point, because we always tend to be focused on things in the immediate term, that we forget that, okay, yeah, you know what, like, all right, in the late 70s, gold actually wasn't even considered an investable asset class, which is kind of crazy. And so, yeah, sort of thinking about things from a historical perspective is so important. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole as well too, right? Which is the whole decentralization, governments, what is a government? I think the three of us here, we've all grown up in very politically stable environments, especially from a historical perspective. But, ask people in other countries, or ask people who have lived through politically unstable times, and then you'll start to quickly realize that, things that we take as constants, when you zoom out far enough, sometimes they're not that constant.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm glad we started talking about markets and whatnot, because obviously I think the three of us have all been investors, whether that's crypto specific or outside crypto. How are you guys thinking about where we are just generally in the markets as a whole, from a global perspective, across all different asset classes?
I was watching a video. I think his name is Steve Zell. He's one of these like large kind of investors, global investors, like a Paul Tudor Jones kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And he was saying that, I've seen all the different cycles and blah blah, and this looks nothing like anything, and I'm just stopped. Like, everything is just all stop, and the smartest investors are just all stop. So it doesn't even matter. I mean, not only am I not from that kind of like public markets background, like I don't have any training or any experience in, a financial institution. Like, I'm like pretty pure crypto in that way, in like the bad ways too. So any opinion I would have would be pretty much baseless and uninformed. And then you layer that on to people who do know and have seen everything and have made and lost, large amounts of money and have learned from it. Like they have no idea. So it's all just, it's kind of a blank slate at this point, right? I mean, there's no guide. There's no up, there's no down, there's no rationale. And even from a macro kind of like political perspective, like a social perspective, like there's also no up and down. Like there's no such thing as facts anymore. Like that's a thing.
Right.
There's no such thing as science anymore. Like that's also a thing. Like the rise of kind of like far right nationalism, like that's also a thing. So everything is mutable. There are no rules. There's no constants. And the rule of the day is fluidity.
That's that's very well said. I mean, for somebody who hasn't been in, markets, I think there's one thing that you get right, which is knowing what you don't know, and that's so important, right? I mean, I think for me, as I'm sure you guys will also sympathize with, in the past couple of months, coming up with predictions, I found just to be such a silly thing to do, right? It's really more just, all right, well, there's so many unknowns, there's so many unknown unknowns, to be able to come to the conclusion that nobody really knows anything is super important, right? And it's one way to prevent getting hosed, because I think that's the one thing that we all need to remind ourselves, right? It's less about it's less about returns. It's more about risk adjusted returns. So anyhow, yeah, that's how I've been thinking about things. How about you, Graham?
Very much in the same boat. I can't see any way where if we go towards a Great Depression or something of substance that Bitcoin, a speculative asset, doesn't get tagged along with that. But at the same time, the COVID-19, we're moving towards an even more digital native lifestyle. So a digitally native currency makes sense to me. That's again, predictions are damn near impossible. Like Jehan said, nobody knows what's going on. I think you have to find a conviction and stand by it. Mine is that I do think a digitally native currency makes sense to my millennial self and Gen Z, as the baby boomer generation is just printing mad capital, and cash is probably, I haven't really used it much in a long time. So I think this will only, this is only going to push that farther. And then, as we look at hack after hack, one of the biggest counter arguments to Bitcoin is that it has no underlying value. And to me, I just look at a world where your data is constantly being, hacked, exposed on the internet, and the underlying value of the Bitcoin network is security. It's network security. You can peg another network to it, and you get the security of the Bitcoin network. That is so huge in my mind. I don't understand how the older generation doesn't value it. When I find my social is like laughable at this point in time, right? Equifax got hacked so easily. So my core conviction is that the digitally native currency makes a lot of sense. That the internet is a global place. We've really seen the world has no barriers, it has no borders. So that's the only thing I can fall back on. And the rest of it, I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on. Maybe the housing market crashes and I finally buy my first home as like one of the weird millennials that never wanted to own anything. But it's just going to be a wild ride, I think. And we got to, stand by what you believe in, and hopefully that narrative plays out positively.
I think that you're talking about this and this whole idea of kind of like fluidity and just kind of change. I feel like, this idea of the kind of public education systems, especially in kind of in like college and higher education, one of the life skills that they should really start to include is this idea of being able to kind of change your perspective and change your angle like that. And the ability to just really adapt what you think because what we've learned is that what you think may not matter in certain periods of transition. And how do you deal with that, like emotionally, spiritually, financially, like legally? How do you kind of reorient yourself? Like, how do you actually do that and, you know, kind of continue? I think that'd be I think that's increasingly going to be a necessary, like, life skill. Otherwise, people are just going to kind of get stuck and just, you know,
Well,
frustrated.
absolutely. Because like this sense or this commonly held belief that you have a career, I think is so outdated. I mean, just the three people here, right? I mean, all of us have had multiple careers.
How many careers have you had?
Man, 3, 4,
Yeah.
right? I
You
turned
count side
35
hustles?
in July.
Do you count side hustles in those careers?
No, I don't. I mean,
Because like ice cream, right? That's a career.
oh yeah.
Okay, great.
No, that is. I mean, at one point in my life, I guess, you know, whether it was ice cream or restaurants, you know, owning food and beverage
Right.
outlets.
What were your other
And
careers? Banking?
Sorry?
What were your other careers?
So I was in finance, investment banking. That was the first one. The second one was then in ice cream, restaurants, bars, beverage distribution. So food and beverage, I would say. Um, the third, actually, yeah, it was. I mean, it is crypto. I'm probably out of the three of us, I'm the one without, you know, a sort of a full-time seat in something. But I definitely feel like crypto is something that I'm going to continue to do um, in whatever capacity it is going forward. That's definitely something that you know that I believe in for sure. So yeah, I guess it's three thus far. Jehan, you for what you've done 2, 3?
Well, I'm older than you guys. I've had a little bit. I've had a little bit more more kind of time to switch. So let's see. I was a developer at an internet startup, and I guess I can loop that into like Sotheby's because I was also doing tech there.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was an art dealer. I also had a cafe, but that was a side hustle. And then I was in crypto. So I guess technically like 4 is about right, I would say.
And Graham, I know you've got a lot too.
No, there's only really 2 major ones. I was in film and television for the majority of my space, and whether that was on like a technical side or moving, you know, as you move up the hierarchy on set, being really camera specific. So did a lot of beer advertisements for AB InBev, Budweiser, Bud Light, Michelob Ultra, Stella, etc. So a lot of lifestyle with brand heavy commercials for TV and for print.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of Chase Bank stuff when you log in and you see those images where you get to put everything. I used to shoot those for a very long time.
Is that your photograph in the background? We need to ask you about that.
That one, yes, and it's Stanley, guys. So maybe you recommend
That's
it.
Stanley.
It's Stanley Hoko.
Are those the lifeguards with the red shorts?
Yes. Oh, I'll show it to
When
you
did you
another
pick
time.
that photo?
But the first time I went to Hong Kong, which was to visit our mutual colleague John Nipper, this must have been in, I don't know, 2009 or so. But yeah, a direct film print, rare these days.
And is that a Mauricio Catalan banana?
This is the bankruptcy of one of the Pittsburgh greats, the Kaufman family, who actually funded Falling Water. Kaufman's was like a Saks Fifth Avenue, and at some point they were selling everything, including the shelves, and we found this giant banana for $5. It's about 4 feet long if I were to go over to it. It's very big. But yeah, so anyway, went from camera work predominantly, and you know, I'd spent a lot of my life and energy working up that field and really making it and actually making a legitimate salary, which is pretty hard these days. And worked for a long time at Gary Vaynerchuk's VaynerMedia, running the camera department over there and doing a lot of shoots for them. And this is actually when I met Alex. I was sneaking off set to discuss with Alex and our 2 other colleagues ICOs that were going on and what was happening, you know. And so in between takes, it would be let's look at what gigawatt, right? One of the, if we want to add some failures in there, guys. But yeah, but you know, then the opportunity to do crypto full time was it happened to fall in front of me, and it was just one of those moments in life where you say, hey, if I'm going to do this, I just got to like dive in. And you know, we we made it work, and it proved to be one of the most amazing rides that I ever took. So I made that pivot, and I don't know if you guys ever feel sort of existential strangeness about the life you left behind for the life that you do have. And there's definitely things about being on set that I miss, and there's definitely things that I do not miss. But I think this will not be my last career either. I always sit there and
Really?
I think, what will the next one be?
Interesting. This is definitely my last career.
Excellent.
Nothing tops this.
Well, Jehan, talk to us more about the art, though, because I mean, I always feel that while those two maybe at face value might seem so far away from each other, I think that from another perspective, if you think about things like scarcity, provenance, stories as well too behind works of art, there's some kind of a parallel, or at least a dovetail to crypto. Talk to us about that, man. I've always found that so interesting.
I'd love to, but before I do that, while we're talking about art on the walls, what's that? Why don't you talk about what's behind you?
Oh, this. To be honest with you,
we're doing art at home.
I actually wish I knew what it was. So, full disclosure, I'm subleasing the place that I'm staying at from a friend of mine, and she isn't in Hong Kong. She actually escaped over to Vancouver. I guess when all the COVID stuff in January was purely a Hong Kong, China, Taiwan thing. I wish I could tell you what it is. I actually have no idea.
It looks almost Buddhist, some of the marking. I mean, it's not like contemporary, obviously, but
right.
It looks Buddhist influenced.
I think it is. She's a very spiritual person. There's books about India, Tibet here. There's Tibetan singing bowls. There's all sorts of stuff here. So I'm pretty sure there is some Buddhist tie-in. But yeah, I mean, I wish I knew. She's hanging it up with blue tack. I can tell you that.
That has wonderful texture, though. I love the way it has shape without really having form, like that.
Yeah.
Sort of frame of its own fabric.
Nice. I'll show you. We'll complete the art tour. I'll show you what's on this wall. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, that one's beautiful.
That so much.
Very cool. Fractal.
It's actually, so this is a Korean, a very famous Korean artist named Haegu Yang. You can't really see it because you get but basically that's, which is actually quite related to crypto. It's actually what's called it's like a security envelope. So it's a collage, it's a paper collage. And the texture or the printed paper that they use on the inside of an envelope so that they can obscure what's the contents.
Right.
The artist basically took sheets of that and cut it up and made the fractal from that. And it's this, she's always kind of doing work about the seen and the unseen and the private, and the kind of public, and the inside and the outside and exterior and interior. And this is like one of her more kind of like graphic works.
Very cool.
Yeah, she's shown it she's represented like Korea at the Venice Biennale. She's in many major museum collections and such. Her name is Haegu Yang. She's great.
Super cool.
But back to your point about the art stuff. I mean, a lot of people used to ask me like, how did you make that jump from being an art advisor to a crypto guy? And first of all, it's just about personal interest, but then, and the ideas, right? I mean, in art, like you're always dealing about the idea, like what is the core idea and how do you explain that to somebody? How do you kind of take a relatively abstract, in many cases, kind of bullshit idea? It may have substance, but often it doesn't. And how do you actually kind of get someone else to be enrolled in that idea? And crypto, as you know, is very much the same thing. Like, there's this, Web3 thing, and it's like complete decentralization, and you got to paint a vision for somebody and get them to see it and get conviction around it such that, they'll put their, money where their mouth is. And then there's a lot of other, just structural parallels between crypto and art too, and tech really. Like you have the founder, which is like the artist. And, I think that many founders are really artists, especially when it comes to kind of technology, right? They have vision, they have kind of belief beyond, the kind of consensus of the crowd. That's what makes them kind of visionary founders. You have, the kind of investors who are like gallerists, where they basically will back and sponsor, a founder, or a gallery will back an artist and, try to kind of help them grow. And then you have the conferences, like the crypto conferences. Those are like art fairs, right? Where you're just kind of like trading back and forth. So actually there's a huge amount of kind of like parallels in terms of just the startup world and art, the world generally. Then of course you have all the scarcity stuff too. So for sure. So there's a lot of like actually very, very transferable skill sets. That actually makes me think maybe I should go back to the art world, find some really good dealers and hire them.
Well, the whole NFT space is pulling art right in, right? Everyone's selling art remotely, and there's a lot of activity around art and blockchain right now.
What do you like? I haven't seen anything that I really like. I've seen interesting things, but nothing that I really like.
Well, that's a different question. Whether I like the stuff or not.
I don't mean
the marketplace.
Like the art. I mean projects. Like maybe you don't have to like the art. I mean like projects that you're like, oh, okay, this can work. I haven't seen anything that can really work for the most part.
Yeah, I haven't. There's nothing that's been super exciting. I'm still kind of more interested on the technical side, right? Which is like how these token relationships interact. So I think it's kind of cool that a crypto kitty, which is technically an NFT token in a wallet, can own another ERC token NFT. I forget, it's ERC, one of the other protocols. But it's like it's an NFT's capacity to own another NFT. So the crypto kitty has a collar, it has a bowl of food, something to that effect. That I find to be pretty fascinating. And I think, through the layer of crypto kitties, they're experimenting. How does this string of ownership work? That's really more where my energy's been to. Otherwise, OpenSea, trying to create a marketplace. I haven't truthfully bought anything on it yet. It's all very digital art, but it's beginning to figure it out and touch and go. And like you said, who's actually using these things? Not that many people, but I still like to dip my toes in and see what's going on.
Well, Graham, how about this? Has there been any kind of art that is crypto related? It doesn't have to be NFT, right? But just like an actual piece of work that you've come across that you've found good? Because this is a conversation that Jehan and I have had countless times before, right? But have you seen anything good?
Isn't even discussing what is good art like a fundamental art conversation in and of itself? Generally, no. I've seen more struggling artists try to hitch their wagon to the crypto train than anything. And then beyond that, I've seen some interesting, like complex woodwork that maybe represents the public key in some geometric manifestation. But, good art is independent of the value attached. So it doesn't, they don't require each other. And in that vein, I also feel like I tend to find art that I resonate with much less than anything else. So, but it's really about like, how do we sell that art? How do we maintain ownership? How do, the marketplace around it? There's a lot of things besides the core art itself. I don't think crypto really makes or breaks your capacity to create something that's interesting and engaging.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to get at was more just any work of art where that you found aesthetically up to snuff, up to your snuff, and where the integrity of the idea also was something that you considered of a certain standard. But
that's exactly the problem of crypto in the art world. Which is exactly the same with like a lot of these kind of crypto startups. It's like it's all technology and no real kind of like kind of strong concept. It's all like, oh, we've got this faster. We've got this kind of like faster engine, and but what does it power? Like, what does it do? And that's where I think a lot of the kind of the state of the majority of like crypto art. It's like, yeah, they're using kind of crypto in this interesting way, and it's all infrastructure. You talked about the market, you talked about like the kind of tokens. That's all infrastructure, but it has nothing to do with like the core ideas And I find that a lot of the crypto art is like, it's just so bankrupt in terms of like any type of critical reading or any type of like, it has no awareness of the art world and the kind of ideas that have been developed over, decades, if not centuries. It's just, it's like just, kind of tooling or like engineering.
Yeah, over engineering reminds me of it's like how Sony could have been Apple, but it never ended up becoming Apple, even though it was like the biggest, baddest name in the mid-90s, right?
It's all body and no soul. That's
okay. I have one. It popped into my brain. Can't remember the name. I'm gonna need to find it afterwards. But there's a group of 2 architects in Brooklyn that have pivoted towards community-based crypto projects, and they did leverage an ERC20 contract for locals in Brooklyn to make contributions, which then went to artists who built installations in a physical park in Brooklyn. Was it necessary to have a smart contract involved? Not necessarily, but the end product created very cool, actually gorgeous installations that gave back to a community and rehabilitated one of these parks in Brooklyn. So that would probably be
funding mechanism. That's infrastructure.
That's all I got, Jehan.
And the funny thing is, it's crazy actually, because like the blockchain and crypto space is so rich in ideas of kind of like in everything from like incentivization to decentralization to like new forms of like governance and how like inclusion, like it's so just kind of like materially like rich in concepts that it's really kind of indicative that the people that are trying to make crypto art are really just kind of like technical. They're engineers basically. Either that or they're just so kind of poor at actual creating art that they don't really know how to utilize those types, recognize and utilize and extend and create narratives around those types of like ideas. And on the other side, you have like real artists, like, the Haegu Yangs of the world who really understand, fine art production and kind of critical ideas that will, stand, much less extend kind of the test of time, who probably just don't know enough about, haven't really done the work to understand how deep this rabbit hole is. And I'm just waiting for that point. There's a few artists, right? Simon Denny does it. He's very, well known and famous in the art world. Hito Starrell, she's a German artist. She's also kind of, I think she might have won the Golden Lion at Venice, which is like the top prize. Like she's done some work in it. So other than that, it seems to be very antiseptic, kind of very like, I don't know, not really a good blend of kind of form and function in terms of that. So either have one or the other. And I'm waiting for the golden age of like, blockchain and crypto art. It will
kind of feel like you need, more digital adoption. Like when we have a virtual space that we step into, then the crypto component maybe becomes bigger. I just don't know if it's necessary for physical art, in terms of, like I made this because it represents something about Bitcoin. Okay. I don't, but I always really saw it as when we have avatars and we want those avatars, I want mine to be unique versus yours. And we all have the same starting pieces, but that's where NFTs come into play, right? And then, your manifestation in your digital space or your home could actually have art that only you own and you could actually sell to somebody else for value. That's sort of where I saw it. And I just think we're obviously not anywhere near that place yet.
Yeah.
But happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I think that element of just having people that understand, UX and
yeah,
and communities of people where maybe we're not the most technically proficient, but we're just like everybody else, regular people. How do you tap into the mindset of those people? But yeah, I mean, as Jehan said, I think it'll come. It just takes time, right? I mean, if anything, you're looking at the whole financialization narrative of crypto. I'm pretty confident that what has been and what currently still is a pretty counter consensus trade will become a consensus trade in the next.
What do you mean by that? What is a counter consensus trade?
One, one that isn't widely held as an acceptable, investment narrative, right? I mean, I think that Bitcoin, it's a narrative that a lot of people are aware of, but most people in the institutional space, when it comes to investment, still sort of poo-poo it, right? But I do think that in the next 12 to 18 months, we all know how gold is such a consensus trade right now, right? I think that Bitcoin will be a consensus trade over the next 12 to 18 months. Speaking of which, that actually brings us really nicely to one kind of random question that I had for the both of you. We all know that the halving is coming up. What are you guys doing for the halving?
Yeah, are you guys buying the halving or selling the halving?
I'm doing the same thing. I'm just hodling. I only do dollar cost averaging. The rest of it is too difficult, except for when it really tanks. Then I'll pick something up. But I don't know. It should be fun to tune into some live streams, and hopefully it's a non-event, I guess.
What time is it? Ish?
Sometime tomorrow.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure.
Isn't it Monday Asia time, sometime in the afternoon or early evening?
Yeah,
I think. Look. Actually, Jehan, are you going to go to the little thing that Clement is hosting?
Yeah, on Tuesday night though, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. It's Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's after the halving.
Yeah, it's after the halving.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be fun. I mean, I see in that group chat there's a bunch of people that whose names I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, but I got to get home because I'm hosting. So as part of my little kind of Kaufman Fellows program, this kind of VC group, I started something called the Blockchain Special Interest Group. So I've actually got Vitalik to kind of kick off the first session and get some interesting perspectives for the global VC set. Try to win some hearts and minds.
I'm assuming you're doing this over video, right? It's not.
Yeah. Because actually, a lot of the Kaufman Fellows they're scattered all over the world,
overseas. Makes sense. Well, couple of quick fire questions for you guys. What's been your quarantine COVID vice?
Bicycling and doing picnics down by waterways here in Florida.
Dude, that's not a vice.
That's not a vice.
All right. My vices have remained the same. Alcohol.
What are you drinking?
A lot of Boddington's Pub Ale.
Huh.
Okay, all right.
A British beer.
Nice.
You guys?
I wouldn't say I picked up any additional vices, just the normal ones, probably drinking the same amount, maybe smoking a little bit. Probably shouldn't be doing that, but overall I would say I justify it because I'm still on the whole 95% plant-based, so I figure it's a wash.
Yeah,
you're pretty healthy, man. Yeah, for me lately it's been making scones, eating tons of scones, and making pizza.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
You have a pizza stone?
No, unfortunately, no pizza stone, but we do have a very, very hot oven, which is essential for that kind of stuff.
I started making pasta.
I've been following that. It looks delicious.
Really? You know what? It's pretty easy. It's shockingly easy.
Jehan, as you and I both know, having both been in the restaurant space, anytime you're selling flour and water and charging a premium, that's a good model.
Well, except now.
Yeah. Wait, so what pasta have you been making, man? I saw the pictures. It legitimately does look good.
So I've made 2 pastas so far. I started off with just like straight noodles, like linguine type of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that went pretty well. I was like, oh, this is not hard at all. And then I made the jump into filled pastas. So I did like an Asian ravioli. It was like, so I made the dough, you know, and actually I find that when I get stressed, like maybe this is one of my vices, like I kind of want to make dough. That's it. Like, I'm just like, yeah, I want to knead the shit out of this. My sister's like, oh, I'm going to buy you a pasta maker. I was like, I don't want one. I want to do it by hand. And you should watch I was so inspired by this. Have you guys tried Quibi?
I haven't. I kind of actively stayed away from it, but
it's interesting. So
you good?
So Quibi, it's like, like Meg Whitman and Jeffrey Katzenberg's thing with like the 10-minute episodes. So I watched this thing called Shape of Pasta, and that's actually where I really got inspired to like make the pasta. I was like, this looks easy. And so I did like a ginger, hard tofu, Chinese mushrooms, scallion, and fermented kind of tofu paste, like filling. Did a little fried up, and then I just, filled it, sealed it, and remarkably, they all stayed sealed. I was like, that was the win.
And it was easy.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's obviously pretty easy. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, we had the same experience making tortilla shells for Taco Tuesday.
Nice.
In some, or the tortilla itself.
Oh, right. Soft ones.
Soft, yes. In our attempt to maintain some sort of schedule to Tuesday is Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, Taco Tuesday. Taco Tuesday.
Nice.
You guys didn't
and
get
you,
that.
Yama?
That's a LeBron James reference. Me, yeah. I mean, same thing. Dough, scones and pizza. Really.
Yeah. Carbs are an easy safety net.
Yeah. I mean, if I was in LA, there would be other things, but yeah, I mean, over here it's pretty much just making new food, really.
Yeah.
I've been pretty excited about how I hope, hopefully, fingers crossed, Hong Kong continues to do a good job with keeping the virus under control, and we can start to do more things. Go work out at gyms. Just have a more open society again, because the past month has gotten pretty tough. I would say the first 4 or 5 weeks were okay, but then the past, the back half of that has gotten a lot tougher, just because everything's so monotonous.
But do you feel that you're re-engaging with some of your more human side? Like, I've been playing a lot more guitar, drawing a lot more, cooking pretty much every meal. Going, when we do go outside, there's empty streets, so you can bike around, you can move around. There's some parts of, the consumerist society that maybe I don't miss as much.
This is true. 100%.
But the gym I miss very badly. And martial arts are a no-go for a long time, which is what I really feel is lacking in my life these days.
Oh yeah, little known fact, everybody: Graham can kill people. Straight up.
I just want that human touch, even if it is their gross, sweaty, disgusting humans.
There was a time, I forget what it was. We were at some conference, and there was a confrontation. Anyhow, I saw Krav Maga Graham sort of
come out just a little bit and say, hey, don't F with me. Well, I haven't done anything in a long time. I've been quarantined just like you guys.
Fair enough.
Moving up a weight class. one bread product at a time.
Aren't we all? Well, yo, guys, I mean, thanks. That was a lot of fun. I don't know if you got anything else you guys want to talk about, but I'm pretty good.
Yeah, no, it seems like a good place to wrap it. That was a lot of fun.
Super fun.
Sweet.
All right, gents. Have a good time. Enjoy Hong Kong, and hopefully everything gets healthy and opens up for you, and then let me know how it goes. I'll let you know how America goes as we roll the dice.
America. All right. Be well, guys.
All right.